Whose idea was it for all of these to be 24 frets? Now that the head plates are dry, glued on and looking quite good, I can drill my truss rod access, which ideally I would like to do before I do too much up here, because any kind of risky jobs you want to get done before you've done too much work, just in case things go wrong, and then at least you've not wasted too many hours. But unfortunately I need to drill it through the headstock veneer, which means I can't do it until this point. But I'm going to do it now. I'm going to use the jig that I made, which is full of dust. When I made it when I drilled the access for the truss rod in the Phoenix base, which, if you haven't seen that video series, why? It's brilliant. I've actually just been editing some bits of it. So it's 7 o'clock and I'm going to have to go and get some food soon because I haven't eaten yet. But I made this jig for that, and I absolutely loved the way that it was just a really slick, kind of long hole through to the truss rod. On these I'm going to do it slightly differently. I'm going to keep the hole, but I'm going to line it with some aluminium tubing, because I feel like it, really. And it'll make certain bits a little bit easier, like tidying up the inside of the hole where we've got all the veneers showing was a little bit challenging, because I had to get that perfectly clean and tidy, which I will still do on some guitars. But I think the Juniors, the whole point of the Juniors is that they're a stripped back, more simple guitar, which means I can make them a bit more affordable. What I need to do is attach this in here. This jig slots into the truss rod slot and kind of just pushes up with this tube here against the headstock. Not too tight, otherwise it messes up all the angles, and we don't want that. I have recently reinforced it with some kind of epoxy putty and epoxy glue and more super glue, because I wasn't particularly happy with the way it was attached. It was temporary and made quickly for a one-off. I will one day make a better version of this that looks a bit prettier as well, but for now this is what I'm going to use. So I'm going to attach that to my workbench, and I'm just going to stick this in the hole and wiggle it round until good things happen. Well, so far in this series of trying to make the Phoenix Junior a more kind of batch producible guitar, we've got the bodies. So we've got 2 single cut, 1 double cut, 2 swamp ash, 1 mahogany. We've got the rough necks, 2 Padauk and Wenge, and 1 mahogany and maple. They're at a comfortable point to keep them to one side now, and I want to treat fretboards as a separate component for the interests of kind of making them in batches. So I've got 2 pieces of rosewood and 1 piece of ebony. These are pre-thickness down to 6mm, which is slightly thinner than standard, but I quite like a thinner fretboard, so that's what I'm going with. What I need to do first with these is figure out which I'm going to use with which. I'm quite tempted to just go with 2 rosewoods and an ebony there. Or I could equally have rosewood for both of the single cuts and ebony for the double cut. I need to have a think about that. It's not going to affect the way that I work on them, so that decision can be made later on. So if anybody's got good suggestions or reasons why I should pick one way or the other, stick them in the comments. I'll be interested, and as I usually do, I'll probably ignore them and do my own thing anyway. But I think the first thing I need to do with these, other than figure out which one I'm going to use them for, is to get them marked up, measured, make sure I've got the right dimensions for everything I need, find out where my nut line is going to be, find a centre line, and for ease of manufacturing these in batches, I think a radius is probably going to be the best first step. Because if I've got it radiused, then all I have to do from that point is cut slots, cut the taper, index onto the neck. So I think that's where we're going now. I'm going to dig out my radiusing jig after I've put these away. Well, that's 68, 72, and some extras, slots, cut. Now, I'm planning on tapering these quickly, cutting them down to size before I do anything else. So to do that, I'm going to use the neck taper template that I made, and I'm going to attach them onto here slightly further down the neck than the nut line, which means that the taper will be ever so slightly wider, and it'll give me a little bit of extra material on the sides to sand away when it's glued onto the neck. I'd much rather have them overhanging a little bit, because that way you can get a bit more tension on the sides to tighten up the glue joint. Also, if anything tears out, it's a lot easier to fix then. So if I do that next on all three of these, I can then get some tape onto these and start marking out for inlays. This is where it's all kind of, it's a bit of a laborious one-off type process, and this is where the difference between having a CNC for certain jobs and not having a CNC becomes very evident. 90% of the time spent drilling for the inlays is actually spent marking out the fretboard and preparing and measuring, rather than just being able to drill. It's not something that I can easily make a template or jig for, just because of the fact that it's on a radiused surface, it's holes at certain distances. I could make a jig, but I'd have to have a negative radius, and it would take me quite a while. It would probably take me longer to make a usable jig for this than it would to completely rebuild my CNC machine, learn how to use the programs properly, and run 3 or 4 tests. Because really I'd need a CNC machine to make the template, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of it. I used to hate CNC. I'm kind of coming round to it a bit now. I can see its benefits. Even if you just use it for jigs and templates, it's really useful. Oh well. Tapering, inlays. And I'm going to be using my standard aluminium tube with a shell dot in the middle on these. But I think I'm going to use a slightly smaller size than I would normally do. So I think it'll be 6mm tube with, I think it's the one I've got's got a 1.5mm sidewall, so it'll be a 3mm shell dot in the middle. Should look quite nice. But I'm going to get on with that now. And I'm not going to talk because I've got things to be running off on my CNC for other projects, and it's quite noisy, so you won't be able to hear me. But off we go. Well, I did a few bits and pieces that don't really need to be shown because I've kind of gone into more detail about them on other videos. Things like sanding down the inlays and checking the radius, indexing the fretboard in the right location on the neck and things like that. What I need to do now is actually glue on the fretboards. I fancy trying something I've not done before. I'm going to use my vacuum bag to glue them on. I've never glued a fretboard on with the vacuum bag, partly because I've only been doing one at a time and it's a bloody massive bag, but also partly because I've just got other ways of doing it. But I don't have clamping coils and things to do 3 at once, and I fancy giving it a go. So what better time than now to do something completely untested and a bit random. Now, I have been using this vacuum bag at work recently to glue fretboards onto a few neck blanks there. They come off the CNC as a flat blank. They're flat paddle headstocks, and the fretboard gets glued on at a stage before it's all fully cut out. So the fretboard is just a flat piece of wood with no slots or inlays or anything in it, and the neck is carved in the back, but it's still a flat piece of wood on top. With that, I've made a board that goes underneath and on top, and that seems to work for those. However, doing that this way on these I don't think will work, because the fretboards are already radiused, so if I've got a flat board I'm only going to get pressure up the middle, or one side where if it tilts. Also, I can't do that on the back because they're cut away and I've got an angled headstock. So I'm going to use the flatbed of my workbench as a reference to index. I'm going to put the fretboard side down, and the bag will actually just flex up around these. I just need to make sure that I've got this matting in the right place so that the air can all escape. It could go horribly wrong, or it could work. But as it is, I'm not sure I can really talk through it, so I'm just going to have to get some glue on these and then get them in the bag and kind of hope for the best. There we go. Well, so far everything seems to be working. Everything's nice and flat. And obviously, because I've got nothing underneath this, it's the vacuum bag is pulling both sides up. So the fretboard is gluing nice and evenly. I think this should work. We'll see in an hour or two when I can unclamp it. Might go get some coffee.